Today we are going to be exploring I guess it's going to be a three week series on what gift is this. Since last week weather kept us from meeting this week, we are going to get into what gift is this, and the specific gift is the gift of faith. We'll be in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, very briefly, just one verse, and that's coming up quickly. And we'll be in a few verses in Hebrews 11 in just a little bit. So what is a gift? I looked up the definition. Every now and then I do this. The definition, according to Merriam, is a gift is something that is bestowed voluntarily and without compensation. It's a gift. It's freely given. And another definition it had is it's a talent, an endowment, an aptitude, or an inclination. Something you can do, right? So it's something given, and it's something that you can do, and God in His mightiness managed to put both those definitions together to give us something freely that we can use in service to Him. It's both a gift and it's a talent. And the intention is these spiritual gifts are something that we use for God. Our passage in 1 Corinthians, it's 12:7, says this. Now to each one, I'm going to say it again, each one. Riley, can you say each one?
No.
Each one. Can you say it? No? Now to each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. It didn't say to this one or that one. It said to each one. If you're saved, if you know Jesus, you have a spiritual gift or 2 or 3 or 10, depending on how God has gifted you. You have a spiritual gift. I want you to think in terms of supernatural for spiritual gifts. Most of us have natural talents of one sort or another. Most of us have things that just came to us because of biology, because of how we're made up. And that's not what we're talking about in a spiritual gift. Now, you might already have an aptitude toward it, but God supernaturally boosts your aptitude if that's the case. And there's a lot of different gifts we could talk about. Today is faith, but there are a lot of different gifts that God bestows on us that His intention is this gift is for you, but it's not for you to put up on a shelf and look at. It's something for you to use, to exercise, to maintain. The fact is, even though it's somewhat supernatural, anything that you do for God, for yourself, anything that you do on a consistent basis only gets better as you exercise it. So, again, I just want you to focus on this idea that a spiritual gift is a little more on the supernatural than the natural side. You may not have been born with it. You may have an aptitude, but it could be something that you totally were not born with. And I just want you to have that in your mind. Now, to get into the spiritual gift of faith, I want to read out of Hebrews 11. It's the first through the 6th verse in Hebrews 11. And I want us to listen to just a brief description of what faith looks like. Anyone can have faith, by the way. All of us should have faith. And we're going to get into what supernatural faith looks like in a little bit. But this is what Hebrews chapter 11 says. And by the way, if you get a chance later today, read the whole chapter of 11, because it's an amazing testament of what faith is. But the first 6 verses say this. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Confidence in what we hope for, assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen is not made out of what is visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. That'd be the way to go, by the way, if you can manage it. I only know of there's a couple instances where it's talked about, but he didn't experience death. He was just taken. Before he was taken, He was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So that passage gives us just a glimpse about what faith is and what it looks like. And all of us, again, if you're a Christian, all of us are supposed to have expressions of faith. All of us are supposed to have faith in God. Whether it's natural or supernatural, all of us should have it. It's just maybe sourced a little bit differently. So you heard the first verse. It said, faith is confidence in what we hope for, and it's assurance about what we do not see. Some would tell you that seeing is believing. You've heard that before, right? Seeing is believing. Well, I can see it. This is a coffee cup. I can see it. I believe it's a coffee cup because I can see it. That's what most people would tell you. But can I tell you that when it comes to faith, it's a little bit backwards from that. And truly, there are times we cannot see it until we choose to believe. Until we choose to lean in on the Word of God and believe what He says is true. Sometimes it's impossible to see that what He says is true. So many times I've heard people talk about, I don't see evidence of God. You've probably heard people say that. I don't believe He's real. If He's real, why does He let all the evil happen? If He's real, fill in the blank. There are a lot of people who do not believe that God is real. And what I would say is the way that you see God is not to necessarily watch for Him to come into the room, but to take a chance, to choose to believe, to choose to seek after who He is. And as we choose to believe, my experience is I chose to believe in God. I was able to see Him. As I took Him at His word, as I had faith in His word, I was able to see Him. So Cain and Abel, they didn't have the Bible. In all likelihood, there was no written word in that day. It was just all spoken word that they used for teaching and everything else. Cain and Abel didn't have a Bible to tell them who God was or what faith was or any of that. So they truly did have to act on faith when they attended to God. So you have one, Abel, who in his faith, in his belief that there was a God, he chose the very best to give to God. That's what Abel did. He chose the very best of the best of the best. He did it by faith, hoping that it would be something that honored God. Whereas Cain, you ever just kind of give out the leftovers? You know, I would like to give you, I think it'd be okay to give you my best, but don't want to put out that much effort. So it's kind of like if a guy only cleared out part of his driveway and didn't do the effort to clean out the whole thing, and you had to walk across ice to get in the driveway. Cain didn't want to show the full measure of faith. He cut corners. He says, well, this is probably good enough for God, and tossed it at God's feet. From the earliest days, Abel showed a faith that God existed, and a faith that this God that existed should be honored, and that God would, in turn, look favorably on having the best given to him. He did it on faith. He got killed for it, by the way. Enoch, can you imagine having a faith so big that when the end came, you didn't have to die?
That's not the nose.
That'd be pretty amazing. The end comes and God says, hey, don't worry about the death thing. Just come on. You come with me. We'll just go to heaven. That was the faith of Enoch. It was big. Didn't even have to die to go to heaven. There's a good chance that Enoch had the spiritual gift of faith, even though they hadn't even defined what a spiritual gift is so much in that day. That's how big his faith was. Let me give you something a little more practical to think about. Michelle and I, we lived in Midwest. We went to church in Midwest City for a while. And at that church, we had it was a pretty big building. And we had both of the air conditioners in the main part of the building go out at the same time. And by the way, it was summer. and we didn't have a budget to replace two $10,000 air conditioners, or I think it was two $10,000 air conditioners we had to take care of. Well, we didn't have that money on hand, so the pastor said we are going to go out on faith, and we're just going to believe that God can provide for this. And he called it Miracle Sunday because he was expecting, and most of us were expecting, that by faith God was going to take care of that bill, even though we didn't have it in the checkbook, we didn't have the money, it wasn't there. And that Sunday came, and we leaned in on our faith. And on that Sunday, more than the full amount was given. Here's how amazing God is when you have faith. He prompted a man to come to church who he was attached to the church, but he hadn't been there in years. He had never been there in the time Michelle and I had been attending. And on that particular Sunday, God urged him, you need to go to church. And that man put a check for, I think, over half of the amount that was needed. And that's the only Sunday in the whole time we were there that he was ever at church on Miracle Sunday. It was a product of faith. We were able to pay for that. We didn't have to go out on a loan. We were able to pay for that. It was an act of faith. That's what faith looks like. Now, understand this. Our faith does not have to be big. Jesus said if it's as big as a mustard seed, it's big enough, right? That's not very big. Our faith, it's linked to our obedience to God. Jesus says, if you love me, you'll obey what I command, right? So our faith and our obedience are linked together. We show our love for God through faith in him, through listening, and he tells us to have faith over and over again, in our obedience to have faith. In a lot of ways, it defines that relationship we're going to have with God. All of us, every single Christian, should have faith. Some have what we call the gift of faith. So for me, one of my spiritual gifts is faith. I didn't expect it, didn't ask for it, but I received it. And it kind of works out like this. Michelle's probably going to be shocked by this. Some of it, maybe. Prior to the manifestation of the gifts of the Spirit, I was a person that was prone to things like worry. I had a lot of doubt. I was not... Oftentimes, I wasn't even really comfortable in my own skin. I was uncertain about most things. I was not at least as it came to community, I wasn't much of a risk taker. Now, I'd sled down this street where we're at on a sheet of ice all the way down, despite the fact cars were going up and down. So that part, I was okay on. But when it came to social interaction, I was very reserved and inward. And part of what the gift of faith did for me is it gave me this ability to believe in things that literally I couldn't see. It gave me, it changed me from being a pessimist to an optimist. And some people would say, your optimism, I've had this said to me, it sickens me. How can you be optimistic in this? So when hard times come, it's not hard for me to look and see there's a bright side somewhere. And that's not something that came natural. That's something that came supernatural. That was a gift that God gave to me. He uses that in me to do things like encourage others. He uses that in me to help push myself and others forward when sometimes it'd be real easy to step back and say, well, maybe it's just time to quit. It wasn't something that came natural to me. But because of the presence of the Spirit in my life, I have become a different person. I've become transformed. And this spiritual gift of faith has given me the ability to just trust God more so than I ever believed was possible. And in matters that I think some people would kind of scratch their head and say, why are you trusting God in that? Everyone here knows that I had cancer over 12 years ago now. And Michelle, you might testify to this. I didn't have any worries during my time of having cancer. Is that true? It's a true statement. Most of the people around me were more concerned about the cancer than I was. And I said over and over again, God's bigger than cancer. My God's bigger than cancer because of this supernatural faith that He has allowed me to have. And I try not to take it for granted. All of us have gifts that we can and should use for God and for His purpose. All of us have those. Faith is one of mine. Maybe it's one of yours. And the good news is, even if faith isn't one of your spiritual gifts, all of us can have expressions of faith in our lives. All of us can learn to trust God. And if you've struggled with your faith, can I just say, if you lean into who God is, if you lean into your faith, if you'll do that, you're going to find out that your life is more vibrant. And you're going to find out truly you're just kind of in for the ride of your life as you ride out on the waves of faith. So that's my encouragement for us, to be people of faith. My encouragement for us also is to be people who seek after the gifts. Your gift may never be the gift of faith. Or it might be something that's latent, that's already there, that you haven't chosen to use. Because the flip side of gifts is He gives them to us, but we don't always choose to use them. Sometimes we put that gift on a shelf, on a box, in a closet, and we choose not to use it. It doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that we need to listen a little more closely. So, my encouragement to you, explore faith. Explore your personal faith. And maybe take some time to ask God, is this one of my spiritual gifts? And if it is, boy, you're looking at an amazing experience as you walk with God. And that's the words I have for us today.